Welcome back to Art CSC FST 220 Intro to 3D Modeling with Maya. Today's lesson is going to be focused on XGen and one particular aspect of XGen of creating these sort of interactive leaf blades, leaves for ground, grass, tall grasses, short grasses, dynamic grasses. You can see how XGen can also be used to create hair for characters. That's not what we're going to do today. Just keep in mind, though, everything we do today could be put into an animation in the future and be made flowing and dynamic and interactive. But we're going to start off. I'm actually going to walk you through a tutorial that Autodesk created, and Arnold created a little while ago, and that's this creating grass with splines. There's some little catches in this tutorial, though. I think, this. I'm not sure when this was published. It's a great tutorial, but there's some aspects of it that are incorrect, and so I'm going to try to walk you through it in this particular tutorial. And you're going to get to use some expressions, which is really cool. You're going to learn how to add some little custom expressions to create random bends in the grass blades, random color shifts within a certain spectrum of color. It's a pretty fun what you can do with this. And I'm going to just in the background here. Oh, let me turn on the Arnold render. There we go. Come on, buddy. Oh, of course, there we go. Just so you can kind of see as I zoom in on it, there's some really nice flowing dynamic things going on with the blades, with their bending both vertically and horizontally, and then you can see that color shift going on from like a light yellow to a green. So it's really doing its best to mimic what grass would look like on a lawn. However, I discovered something. You're going to learn here as we move forward how to open up what's called the expression editor on a bunch of different parameters. And the original 2020 version, which was actually created in the end of 2019, has a bug. And when you go to click on the expression button, I'm going to close this for right now, which is like a button like this right here we're in XGen, don't worry, I'm going to back up and show you how to get here. But when we get to this point, you would click on this button and nothing would happen. You're supposed to click on it and get this little pop-up that's the XGen expression editor. So it was a bug, and it wasn't fixed for a really long time, and it took me a bunch of forum seeking to figure out what's going on. And what's going on is that when you go to download the newest version from the education site, I don't know if this is the same when you purchase Maya, but I know all of you are downloading the free education version. You end up getting the old version of 2020. There's been 3 updates now since then. I don't know why they're not updating that version that comes down, but I'm hoping this update will actually help clean up all of your builds a bit, because I know some of you have some bugginess happening here and there. And the way to access this is through a website that's just called manage.autodesk.com/home. And you'll log in with your same account that you set up with Autodesk to get Maya to begin with. And then if you look over here on the left, there's a list of product updates. And this is where I found the only place I could find the Mac version, the 2020.3 update. Now on PCs, because I think Autodesk has been such a PC-dominant company for decades, they make some stuff for Mac, but not a lot. On PCs, you have a whole Autodesk desktop app. It's kind of like how Adobe has that Adobe update that gets loaded in, and it helps you keep track of all of your Adobe software and the Creative Cloud app. Well, Autodesk has that, but of course only for PCs. They have not taken the time or effort to make one for a Mac. So I think this is part of it. This is sort of why you're not seeing this. There's version 2020.3 released in October of 2020. And if you look through here, there's 2020.2 and 2020.1. And they fixed this expression editor in 2020.1. Plus added in a bunch of features each time they release something like this. So it's stability plus features. So all of you go to manage.autodesk.com. Then click on product updates, and then download the 2020.3. If you're on a PC, use your desktop app. You can, if you haven't downloaded that, you can do Autodesk desktop app, and there's a whole website for that. So if you're on a PC, install this, and this will help you do all your updates. And it'll even hey, there's a new update, install it. Isn't that nice? So I got on the forum and was like, come on guys, let's make that Mac version, or at least get the newest version up for download for these students that are just starting out. But once you download it, it's a nice download. I've had issues in the past where you go and you go to install and you have to having to like do a clean install of Autodesk, which is a pain in the butt. It's like finding all these files all over your computer. You don't have to do that. You just reinstall this new version and it replaces all the original older files. I just tested it myself and it worked great. So this is what it comes down at. It's pretty big. It's like, oops, I hit the wrong button there. It is a couple gigs. So if I pull this up, it's 1.98 gigs. So it really is like reinstalling all of Maya plus adding in a bunch of stuff for Arnold and some new plugins and blah, blah, blah. So it's pretty big and hefty. But like I said, I didn't have to delete anything first. It just replaced all my older versions. And now it's running. So yay. Okay, so there's my whole thing on how to get yourself updated and just walking you through what I learned over the last week or so as I was trying to troubleshoot why this tutorial wasn't working. Okay, so anyway, once you get all that, then you get this lovely, you know, expression developed, grassy knoll kind of style. But let's start over and let me walk you through how I did what I did. And like I said, I'm back to this tutorial again, which is linked off of today's module. It's actually the first homework option that I gave you for extra credit if you want to make an extra credit point. So it's this link right here, okay? All of these up here are just resources on XGen. They kind of go through all the other sides of XGen. So there's some really cool stuff that XGen can do, you know, going into dynamic hair and even putting objects and repeating objects. But we're not going into that today. That's a whole other more advanced lesson. So here's the grass with splines. So I'm going to walk you through and help you. There's still a few little hiccups in that tutorial, and I'm going to help you through them. All right, so let's create a new file or a new scene. I'm not going to save that. I'm going to go ahead and save. Let's call this XGen test. Test 2. All right. Now up here in the top, if you want to, you can come up here and actually pull up the XGen workspace, which does switch some things around. It like, you know, it brings up the XGen panel at least, which is cool. But I kind of like the classic, and then you can always just add the XGen panel to that. So it's up to you what you want to do. I end up going back to classic, but you do want to be able to at least get to this XGen panel. So if you can't get that through Classic, then you can go up here and bring up XGen. There's also an XGen interactive grooming, but that's more for like characters with XGen hair. We're not doing that today. So first thing we're going to do is want to have a surface that we can have all this XGen grass grow on, right? So I'm going to go to poly modeling. I'm going to add a plane, scale it up. I'm going to go to my attributes. I'm just going to increase its subdivision to like 25 by 25. And if I go back to the XGen, and while this is selected, if I click on the Create New Description, it's going to put grass across this whole plane, okay? But I could also go in and just choose specific faces. Actually, I think I'll do that. I could come in here and choose specific faces and hold down Shift and, you know, get as much of this as I want, really. And then it'll only put grass in the areas that I choose. So that's up to you what you want to do. You know, maybe I'll put a couple more over here, have a couple spots of grass. You know, maybe you have zones that are dusty and then some zones that are grassy, or maybe it's more for you about making like leaves and blades on a tree. You know, you can do a lot with XGen. It doesn't just have to be for making grass on a field. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just select a few more here, and we'll see how this looks. So I've got my selections and faces, or again, select the whole thing. I'm going to come over here to the right, and I'm going to click on Create New Description under the XGen panel. Now this is going to ask me what we're going to do here today. We're going to do the splines, and as you can see, it has a description here used for long hair, vines, etc. Groomable splines you can use for short hair, fur, grass, etc. Then there's custom geometries. That's where you can actually put another piece of geometry in and repeat it. There's little spheres for doing pebbles and marbles and round objects. There's cards for doing flat textures and scales on like a fish or a creature. Like I said, we're going to start with splines. It's an easy one to get started with. You can name it. I suggest putting a unique name in here. So I'm going to put description, because if you put the wrong one in, it will load an old one. So grass 2, I'm going to call that one description grass 2. I don't think it'll take like a dash mark. All right, you might hear my son in the background. Sorry about that. He's here with me today. And we can go ahead and stick with that collection. It's going to create a new collection name each time, and that's fine. We're going to choose randomly across the surface. There are ways to use guides to create at specific points as well, but we've already kind of done that with our selections here ahead of time. And we're going to use the attributes controlled by expressions. And then we're going to go ahead and hit create. And you can see it's created some little like placeholder objects, these initial little kind of splines across my surface where I had selections at, right? So, all right. So I'm going to click off of it real quick just so we can kind of go ahead and see the grass a little bit better. All right. Now we're going to come down, and one thing you can do is you can go to preview, and you can say, like especially if you're on a computer that's kind of slow, maybe you don't want to see 100% of the splines at any given time. You could knock that back quite a bit and say like, just show me like 10% of them. Now they're going to all disappear for a second, but don't worry, they're going to come back. And like I said, if you have a slow computer, that's going to help so your computer doesn't slow down as you start to cover big surfaces with a lot of XGen grass. All right, so now I'm going to go to my density here. In the tutorial, it says to put in a density of 5,000. I would not do 5,000. I think it's a typo. I think it's supposed to be like 500 because 5,000, you can't even, like, if I put in 5,000, it's like a solid block of grasses. You can't even, it looks like cardboard. So I'm going to go with 500, and that was way more reasonable. All right. Now we are going to go and change the width on. So this is just like the width of each of these individual blades. Right now it's set to like 1 and 1. So for length, I'm going to do double that. I'm going to go to 2. And for width, I think I'm going to go just stick with what the tutorial says and go to 0.05. Now they're getting into that like territory of a blade of grass, right? And then I'm going to adjust the taper as well. I'm going to go with 0.5. and 0.5, so they look more like a blade of grass. It kind of changes the shape of it instead of like a tube like it is right now. So 0.5 and 0.5. So kind of like starts at one end and then comes out and gets pointy at the other end, more like the way a blade of grass does than like a tube. Okay, we're going to keep moving down. Now we're going to assign a texture. We're going to assign a shader, an AI standard surface to this. And it's important you select the right element out of your outliner. So I'm going to open up Collection and choose Description Grass 2. And then I'm going to come over here in my window and right-click and assign a new material. Click on Arnold, AI standard surface. You can see it just turned to gray. And I'm just going to give it a general green so we can start to get this in the right direction. There we go. It's kind of a grassy green. Cool. Now I'll come back out here and go back to my XGen editor. So we have a placeholder now. The other thing I'm going to do is go to Arnold real quick because we're going to start rendering soon. And I'm going to add in a sky dome just so we have some light. All right. And if we want, we can go ahead and render this real quick. I'm going to save. And pull up the render preview for Arnold. And there we go. Nothing too fancy yet. It's pretty dense. That even at 500, I know we're seeing like 10% of that because that's how I set that preview output. But that's really dense. That's like a football field turf. It definitely doesn't look like grass yet. So we're going to do some more to it. Okay. All right. So we're going to come down. We're going to start bending the grass. So first thing we're going to do is go to these. This is where we're going to start to use the expression editors. So if you come down here in the list, we did taper. There's tilts. You can use a slider to do this. Like I can make the whole thing tilt in different directions. I'm going to undo that, bring it back to 0. I can bend them using the slider as well. That one not so much, but you can see how I'm bending the grasses, but it doesn't look natural. They're all like bending in the same way, right? So let's put that back. Let's put that back to 0. And let's put this one back to 0. Whoop. Actually, I think I want to put it right about there. I guess I had it at 0.5. Sorry about that. All right. Instead, we're going to use some expressions. So in the tutorial, they have some expressions here that bring in some random number features here. And so we're going to go ahead and copy it. So all I do is copy that. I selected it and copied it. And I'm going to put it into the bend U and bend V categories. And to do that, instead of using the slider, I click this little icon that looks kind of like a little script box. and that's where the script editor comes up. And so I go ahead and select what's already there, and I paste it, and I apply it. And now you can see I've gotten a random bend that's looking way more like natural grass now, right? So if I scroll around back there, you can see how it's starting to bend in one dimension. Now I'm going to do the same thing to bend V. I'm going to click on the expression editor, select here, and apply. Now we're really getting in the U and the V, we're getting in these two different directions. We're getting a really cool randomness to the bends of the grass. Now we're really starting to look like a grassy plane here and little tufts of grass sticking out in different directions. But to add just a little bit more, we're going to add another expression. And this is to the bend parameter 0. So as I scroll down in this tutorial, there's another little expression here we can use. And all the coders out there, you can start to look at how to write your own expressions. So I'm going to go to the bend 0, pull up that, and apply. And it's just going to bring a little bit more randomness in. As you can see, now it's kind of flowing, but it also played around with like the height of the bends. So it wasn't just like the directions of the bends, but also some bend higher, some bend lower, just the way blades of grass would. Like some are going to be taller, some are going to be shorter. And now if I preview this, remember, under preview, I'm only looking at 10% of it right now. So if I actually bring it up and see it at 100%, that's a pretty nice thick little plot of grass we're starting to build. And those little tufts that I assigned by only making certain selections are really nice. They're just kind of showing up as these little puff balls of grass. So that's kind of cool. If you tried to look at it in preview, like I said, without rendering, it could chunk up your system. So that's why we're doing only 10% in the preview window. But that still looks like artificial grass. You know, it's like this really bright green. So now we're going to learn a little more complex part about adding some random colors into a custom shader. Okay? All right, so doing this, we are going to pull up the hypershader. We're going to find the AI standard shader that I have created. There it is. It's this green. You know, there was one already in there that was like a gray, but we know the one I created is green. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus button just to add the node to my palette here. And then I'm going to do a search over here in the search bar, and I'm going to look for what's called an AI user data color. There it is. So I just added an AI user data color node, and I'm going to go ahead and connect the out color to the base color of my current shader. Now you can see it's no longer green. It's now this like crazy dark gray color. And now what I'm going to do is give a specific name to this. So I'm going to call it, I'm going to give it an attribute, and I'm going to call it grass color with a capital C, just kind of following what the tutorial has us doing. And I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need it in a minute. Okay? Now I'm going to go back to XGen. I'm going to go ahead and close this and go back to XGen. And under preview, remember how I went to preview to change like 10% of the view? So here under preview, I'm going to open up and go down to output settings. And below output settings here, bear with me here, you should see the custom shader parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and paste in grass color. And by default, I think it was on float. You want to choose color because we're adjusting color, and then hit the little plus sign. And now that you have that, you'll see you have a custom shader parameter using that grass color designator that we labeled on the shader itself. And now we can go and get one more custom expression here. Again, a random one that's using, I believe, hex values in a certain color range. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And you'll notice when I added that, there's an expression editor button again. And we're going to paste that in and apply. Now you don't see it in the preview editor right now. We have to render it to see it. This one doesn't come through in the preview, unfortunately. But if we did everything correctly, let's take a look. There we go. We get a nice shift in colors off of my original green, which is pretty cool. And now if I zoom in on that, you can see I'm getting that nice variation in color that's happening up and down off of the original. So pretty easy way. You know, obviously you can play around with all of these values that I've just shown you in a lot of different ways and see where they take you. Maybe you don't want to create like a traditional lawn. Maybe you want a big tall grasses. There's a lot of ways to keep moving, and that's why I gave you some additional resources. But this should get you started in XGen and also get you started in using some of the XGen custom expressions. So hang in there, get in touch if you have any trouble. Again, this tutorial kind of walks you through step by step. Most of it's pretty accurate. There's also some like density stuff. We can add expressions here. It keeps going with changing the length, which is kind of cool. So, we could take one more expression here, and I'll just do it. So I kind of forgot that that was in there. So let me go ahead and close this. And if we go back to primitives and go to length, we can add another one here and apply it. Now it's playing around with the length of the grass in all those spots. And then I could increase the density if I wanted to, because it's going to look a little bit more sparse. That kind of trimmed the grass back, but it's still nice and random. So, you can keep going, and there's some fun little additional stuff, and you can take those apart, and you can increase some specularity on the grass shader to make it look more realistic. You can add backlighting. You can do a bunch of stuff. I'm just using a sky dome. When you actually bring some shadow into this, it's really going to come alive. So play around, look at those expressions, enjoy, and yeah, let me know if you have any trouble getting this going with XGen. All right, good luck.